do what I do at every event, and that is apologise to those who think that they were coming here to hear from the Keith Richards about innovation in transport. That would be surreal, exciting, probably quite fun. So hopefully you're not too disappointed. But as Neil said, a little bit more boring than that, I am chair of the Disabled Persons Transport Advisory Committee, or DIPTAC for short. And I've been asked to cover some of the context around why improving accessibility is important and the role of innovation in that. Now, for those who've seen me talk before, you normally expect a lot of slides. In fact, probably more slides than you'd find at a Costa del Sol water fun theme park. But actually today there's just the one, and that's me. Because I thought slides become a little bit of a hindrance sometimes when you're just talking about context. So what I just wanted to talk about was some fairly straightforward things. Why innovation is key to accessibility, but also to send a warning note that much technical innovation, whilst brilliant and exciting for some, can too often be completely inaccessible to many if it's not properly thought through, if it's not properly designed, and if it's not properly delivered. And it's also important to think about innovation, as Neil has said, not just about technical innovation, but about using people and services in an innovative way. It's also important to think about innovating for access in response to events that happen in the world. I can just think of two off the top of my head. One is the recent case that Doug Paulley brought against the bus company that went to the Supreme Court, which has highlighted a number of issues around space within a limited space on buses. You know, there's a lot of scope there to innovate, to improve access. I might come back to that a little bit later. Another one is the proposed introduction of the ultra-low emissions zone in central London. Again, what a fantastic opportunity, not just to improve the environment in terms of the air we breathe and the use of fossil fuels and diesel consequences, but actually the opportunity when you're redesigning the engineering new buses and coaches and other vehicles that will be using that space, to use that opportunity to redesign the interior. Again, just two obvious to me examples of how events should be leading to innovative thinking. But first, just a very quick explanation of who and what DIPTAC is for those who are not familiar with us. We were set up 30 years ago to provide independent advice to government and ministers on the transport needs of all disabled people. This was under the Transport Act 1985. And as an expert committee, we have to understand how transport works in all its guises, how it's regulated and funded, what experiences disabled people have when using it, or should I say, when attempting and too often failing to use it, what are their needs and expectations, and where transport fails to meet those needs and expectations, how that can be changed to improve access. I mean, no one said it was going to be an easy job. But sometimes it feels a bit like being the England football manager, in that you have to be intelligent enough to understand the rules of the game, but stupid enough to believe you can actually make any difference at all to the way the game is played. Well, we're not stupid at all, but we are optimistic and determined. So that's DIPTAC. But what of innovation and its role in delivering accessibility? Well, innovation is essential in all walks of life. And as Albert Einstein said, if you always do what you always did, you will always get what you always got. And as for many disabled people, what they've always got is a transport system that too often serves at best to make it difficult for them to access and at worst to exclude them completely. So through improved laws, regulations and innovations in design and service provision, we've come a long way in the last 30 years, I mean a really long way. And it's good to celebrate that progress. Promoting the freedom of disabled people to choose where they travel, when they travel, and to be self-reliant, these are key goals and DIPTAC's mission. It reminds me of a previous job I had, though, in the travel industry, when not that long ago, if you spoke to the travel industry about actively encouraging holiday bookings from disabled customers, you would get the response, and this is a serious response that I got, well, we're not specialists in holidays for the disabled. I like to hope we've come some way since then. But that's like saying to me, as a lawyer, you can go where you want, when you want, as long as you go with a whole load of other lawyers, which quite frankly would be my idea of hell, and probably yours too. But in a time of change and great uncertainty, it's important that the Department of Transport in particular keeps the focus firmly on the future and in particular understands how to ensure that people are confident about accessing transport. An ageing population, increasing passenger numbers on the railways, the development of large infrastructure projects, Crossrail, high-speed rail network, the devolution of bus services, innovations in technology, the increase in the use of mobility scooters, new entrants to the taxi and private hire vehicle markets, innovations in the way to deliver information to customers, and the planning and construction of built environments. These are just some of the challenges and opportunities for all of us. So change and uncertainty reinforces the need for innovation, but that innovation has to understand and deliver against the needs of disabled people. Why? Well, between 2010 and 2030, the number of people in the UK aged over 65 will have increased by 50%. And there's a direct link between age and disability. And as my 84-year-old mother keeps reminding me, we all start to fall apart as we get older, dear. And she's right, to the extent that a lot of disabilities are related to our increasing inability to do what we've always been able to do. There are currently about 13 million, depends who figures you look at, 13 million disabled people in the UK. And the disposable income of households with a disabled person is estimated to be £212 billion. Exclude these people, or fail to make your services easy to access, and you lose out on so many levels. So it's the society that we create ourselves that disables people. The physical environments we build, the structures we design, the information we make available, the way we deliver services, and the people involved in all of those things who don't understand how we can deliver these things to include rather than exclude. And disability includes, of course, physical, sensory impairments, as well as those less visible, or what I think is currently called hidden disabilities. I mean, people are out there deliberately hiding their disabilities. It's despicable. But hidden disabilities on a serious level, such as autism, dementia, learning disabilities, anxiety, it's a whole raft. Things that are not obvious to the people who are designing, developing, or delivering services. So why is accessibility important? Well, first, because the law requires it, and I'd say that, wouldn't I, because I'm a lawyer. Secondly, because there are an awful lot of people out there who would benefit from improved accessibility. And that's a large and growing number, primarily due to the aging population. And the development of accessible innovative products and services is the greatest opportunity presented by that aging trend. And thirdly, because society and all of us benefit from accessibility. So for many people, a lack of mobility or confidence in using the transport system is a barrier to employment, education, healthcare, and to a social life. It also comes at a cost to the individual in terms of loss of independence. And research shows that disabled people experience higher transport costs as a result of inaccessible public transport, resulting in increased use of taxis and private hire services, assuming those in turn are accessible to them with their particular needs. So, and what do studies tell us? Well, the Business Disability Forum's Walkaway Pound report, 2015, said that 75% of disabled people had walked away from making a purchase, unable or willing to do so. The most important factor was inaccessible premises, which is, I think, an obvious one. But other important factors that discouraged them from spending were poorly designed products and staff who were not disability confident, who were rude or appeared prejudiced. Poor or inappropriate communications were another area that affected people's spending. Inaccessible websites, telephone systems, printed information have all been given as reasons people did not make a purchase. And over a third of disabled people, and that's, as we've seen, a very large number, said that good disability service was the primary reason for choosing a provider or product. 2/3 chose businesses where they had received good customer service related to their disability, and companies tell disabled people about their accessible products and services attract those customers. And finally, enough of the statistics, but on websites, nearly 3/4 of disabled online customers, 71%, will simply click away from websites that they find difficult to use due to the effect of their disability. That's 4.3 million online shoppers with a collecting purchasing power of £11.75 billion. About 10% of the total UK online spend. So you only need to consider how challenging it is to search and find easy to understand and use websites for booking rail tickets, for example, to realize how difficult it must be for a lot of people who do have disabilities that are affected by inaccessible information and websites. And that area is just in urgent need of innovative thinking. Understanding fares and ticketing, I know there are working groups at the moment looking at that, but there needs to be innovation in how you price things, how you deliver that information and allow people to access it who have disabilities. And innovation is also one of those words that I have a slightly nervous reaction to. I think sometimes the obsession with something new, brand new, although I get the points that Neil was making about a blank piece of paper and really thinking outside the box. But sometimes that obsession with new things stops people focusing on the sensible work of improving through innovation what already is in place and making it reliable, often by focusing on or factoring human beings into the equation. I know, sorry, call me old-fashioned, but I think human beings are very much a part of innovation. And if by innovation we mean something genuinely new in transport, apart from those examples that Neil has referred to, I would argue that there have only been really three moments of genuine innovation in the world of transport. The first, when somebody chiseled out a log, got some sticks and made it into a boat. The second one, when somebody invented a wheel, which is the basis of all land-based transport. And third, somebody invented a wing. I mean, without those, we'd have planes falling out of the sky. They wouldn't even get up there in the first place. So everywhere else has been about evolutionary change, and I think it's very, very important to recognize the need for evolutionary innovation. And much of the focus of this over the past 30 years has been on ways to reduce the number of staff employed in services that deal with customers in the name of innovation. We've seen the end of bus conductors, the widespread introduction of automatic ticketing, barriers, and now there's a fight over driver-only operated trains. I'm not getting into the politics of any of this. A big innovation, for example, in the bus sector was the introduction of low-floor or kneeling buses, which allowed the removal of steps onto the bus and the creation of enough flat area for an area to be set aside for wheelchairs. We've seen that hasn't solved all the solutions from Doug Paulley's case against the bus company. But that was an engineering development about front-wheel drive buses and easier maintenance. It was only afterwards that it was noticed that this would benefit disabled people. And arguably, all the subsequent changes in design, which followed the introduction of accessibility regulations, so this is where the law plays a part, was simply the application of engineering design principles by solving relatively simple practical problems. And those are great innovative ideas, and often very simple. Much evidence exists to detail how often innovative solutions to improve transport and travel experience of disabled people are usually very simple. The Harrington hump. This is used to raise sections of rail platforms to provide level access to trains. I mean, very simple. Often dismissed as being expensive, but that's another argument for another day. Where we think designers could bring most benefit to disabled people using public transport would be two areas. I think easing the journey from the front door to the public transport and at the other end of the journey, often referred to as the final or the first mile. This is often the hardest part of the journey for many people with both physical and cognitive and other impairments. Like ways of making staff assistance available and reliable. So for the foreseeable future, many disabled people, and this includes those with physical and non-physical disabilities, anxiety, mental, cognitive conditions, they're going to need some degree of practical assistance from that increasingly rare, but often individually very innovative commodity, a member of staff. Yet the move towards driver-only operated trains, and I think genuinely where the driver is the only person on the train and no other staff, coupled with increasingly unstaffed stations, that's seen as an innovative way of running an efficient railway service. The focus on removing the staff, giving the job to equipment and allowing technology to deliver is great, but there are areas where this is sometimes impossible to do, and we frequently forget that innovative ways of delivering good human service can often exceed anything that machines can provide. And that's particularly true when it comes to giving disabled people the confidence and the ability to use transport. So no amount of audiovisual innovation, wheelchair spaces, ramps, grab rails will deliver access to transport for disabled people who simply need something more than that, and that's often confidence and human assistance. So making these accessible, all of these things, assists a much greater range of people than just those who are disabled. So solutions such as journey planners, audio-visual announcements on buses, all used by all travellers, making what was a disability innovation a mainstream service. So there are millions of examples of innovative ideas, but what differentiates the best from the so-so, the bad, and the downright rotten? Well, one consistent element of the best ideas is that they were developed, designed, and built by or with disabled people as co-creators. I think that's often missed. Most recent innovations we see all around us can actually be damaging to some people, particularly older and disabled people, if technology gets ahead of common sense. For example, ticket machines at stations. I don't know whether many of you use them regularly, but I've tried to understand some of them, and some of them are good, and some of them are appalling. But they're unusable by many older people in particular, as are smartphone apps and similar services. If they simply, again, replace the alternatives of people, and these are alternatives, not one thing or the other, these things are often hailed as the solution to a problem, but should in reality be delivered as part of a suite of innovative solutions. Some ticket kiosks are modern, expensive, high-tech pieces of kit. Lots of very intelligent people have sat around and designed these things, but not designed or built or installed in many cases with disabled people in mind. So it's a real missed opportunity to use fantastic technology, which then has to be rectified retrospectively and often very expensively. There are great examples in Tyne and Wear and in Barcelona of ticket kiosks on the transport system that have been designed by blind people. So they're intuitive and accessible, not just to blind people, but to all users. They're simpler to use for that reason. And you know what? It makes them easier for everybody. And the Barcelona example also has, for example, the facility to renew your travel pass simply by introducing your existing expiring pass into the machine, and it will renew it for you without having to go through a whole challenging process of doing things and making choices. And that, as you know, is accessible for everyone, but also particularly helpful for people with, for example, learning disabilities. So we've seen an increasing number of car park ticket machines that require you to enter your registration number on tiny buttons before you even get a ticket. I've struggled with those myself. Really useful innovation and heralded as a great step forward in preventing fraud in car parks. A nice, noble aim to have, beneficial to those who are collecting the money. Perhaps an improvement for those, but many people simply, particularly older people, simply don't have the manual dexterity to manage those machines. Not thought through. The requirements of automatic check-ins at airports is another example. The ability to print your own baggage labels. Innovation, yes, useful to many, accessible, not automatically, and they can be hugely bewildering or simply unmanageable for lots of disabled people. Great examples of innovation include Wayfinder. Wayfinder have a display outside in one of the rooms, an app-based system developed by blind people, which you can find more about in the display areas, but makes self-reliant travelling easier. Go and have a look. It's a fantastic example of how innovation can deliver. I was going to talk about mobility as a service for those who know what it means, but I don't think we really have that much time to do that, so I'm going to skip over that, but happy to talk to anybody afterwards about my views on mobility as a service. Mixed, I'll say in summary. The future may also look exciting with connected and autonomous vehicles. Neil referred to these, but don't throw away existing, long fought for regulation and promotion of public transport as we know it now. Instead, innovate, improve, develop accessibility in those existing modes and complement them with these new innovations, such as autonomous vehicles. For many disabled people, and certainly for most of us who won't be early adopters of this technology because it will be expensive, connected and autonomous vehicles may be useful to deliver that first or final mile bit of the journey. If companies use those vehicles to deliver us to the railway station or to the bus station from our front door, fantastic innovation for many disabled people who would otherwise struggle with that first mile and therefore not do any of the rest of the journey. When we do talk about innovation, we automatically think of technology, but we should never forget that innovation in service, in delivery, in quality, in thinking, in designing or redesigning what already exists can have a transformative impact on access. Innovations in technology, though, are certainly key to what we need to concentrate on in promoting thinking on access. But it mustn't be an afterthought or a nice to have, or if we can afford it, or we have to do it because the law or the regulators require it. That's the wrong way of approaching this. And I like Neil's idea of a blank piece of paper. And I think that blank piece of paper also has to represent what are the reasons why you're doing it, and ignore those obvious ones, because they're not the things that should drive innovation. The fact that the law says you have to be accessible is ignored by many people anyway already. So that's obviously not a driver for accessibility innovation. So I'd like the innovators in the room who may have fantastic new ideas that are relevant to the transport sector to be able to answer the question, how would the transport system and all its constituent parts, and that's everything, how would it look and feel if it were designed by disabled people? And go out there and find the answer so you can develop your ideas in a much more informed way. Co-creating with disabled people not only makes more accessible products and services, but taps into that large, growing, and as we've seen, potentially very lucrative market. So there's a real need for innovative technology to improve wayfinding for people with cognitive impairments such as dementia, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, and many others. So information and communication technology brings opportunities to develop wayfinding to enable many people to access many of the opportunities that they're currently unable to reach unaccompanied. So understanding the wayfinding needs of people with those kinds of impairments is essential so that tools using, for example, portable hardware with locational software and apps can be developed that address those needs, not that address the needs of a homogeneous group of consumers which tends to ignore disabled people, because aren't apps fantastic? Aren't these bits of kit fantastic? For many, yes, but also for many not. But they can be if thought through properly. So all technology presents opportunities to improve access and increases options for disabled people. The trick is to ensure that the technology is developed with access very much in mind at the earliest possible time. And as DfT, we've had meetings with the Minister and with colleagues at the department on connected and autonomous vehicles already to say that this is moving ahead of pace. This needs to factor in what the needs of disabled people look and feel like, so that that technology doesn't continue to do what innovation in the past has done to exclude a large number of people. So there's a need for that innovation in providing travel information in appropriate formats, before, during travel. Mobile apps are often heralded as the answer, but of course they can be and do have an important role in accessibility for many disabled people. And just a few navigation aids when walking by giving instruction of the direction at decision points such as junctions for people with visual and mental impairments. Fantastic piece of technology. Providing information on bus journeys, audio-visual, and on other journeys about when you're arriving at the bus stop that you need to get off, when the bus is coming, where it's going. All of those things provide information that's key to people. And another one, providing monitoring information to carers about the location of people who may become lost when travelling on their own. If they're trying to be as self-reliant as possible, technology can help that, encourage that, but also give other people who have the responsibility for caring for those individuals the confidence in knowing where they are and what problems they're having at any particular time, rather than relying on that person perhaps to make a phone call, which of course many wouldn't. Social media offers great potential to build up maps of places, and we've seen this starting to happen now, maps of places which have poor accessibility for disabled people to enable them to share experiences about the good and the bad. And social media allowing shared information about temporary disruptions that cause particular problems for disabled people. So my final plea to innovators, developers, investors, buyers, deliverers of transport services is to always involve disabled people in your thinking, your designing, your testing, and your production to deliver accessibility in reality. as we've seen, there are a large and growing number of people out there who are waiting to benefit from your innovations. So I think that not only is the market opportunity hugely attractive, but the resources, the encouragement, the incentives available to entrepreneurs and innovators, from small startups right the way up to multinationals, all those incentives and resources to develop innovative products and services aimed at people with disabilities have never been better, I think, than they are now. So hopefully, my final thought on this is, hopefully by the end of this conference, you'll know what to do, you'll know how to do it, you'll know why it's worth doing, and all you need to do is go out and make it happen. Thank you very much.